Part 9. We've traveled through Tokyo, who still wants to simulate love? Author, Fei Se Hui-Xiang. Chapter 85. System prompt: you have unlocked the achievement Smell the Scent and Recognize Beauty, and the achievement point is Add 1. Shiina Uman quietly got admitted to the Faculty of Medicine of the University of Tokyo, but no one thought she couldn't do it in Hakuin High School. She has always been a legend. At the end of the year, a related academic paper with you as the first author and Shiina Kian as the second author was published in Nature. It mainly focused on the relevant theoretical technologies required for the complete version of the gene stabilization reagent. Do you know that this is hidden in the gene stabilization reagent, Xiaojinshan behind? Not long after the paper was published, the identities of you and Shiina Kane were discovered by relevant personnel. A girl who just entered the University of Tokyo and a boy who has not yet graduated. More importantly, the two are surprisingly good looking, which caused a storm of public opinion for a while. Some people think that there are experts behind you who are building momentum for your operations, such as Shiina's family using their own connections to pave the way for you. Some people claim that at your current age, you have no possibility of mastering cutting-edge scientific knowledge. But gradually, the direction of public opinion changed. The scene unfolds. Location: Asaba Kazuma's home. Shiina Yuan, who was lying on the sofa, stretched out. As she stretched, a folder of documents quietly slipped down and scattered on the floor. Asahi Kazuma, who was also lying on the corner of the sofa, had enough time to look at her slender waist. Of course, the most important thing is the boyfriend shirt she is wearing. Wearing a shirt with the scent of her usual shower gel on her body gave people an indescribable and subtle feeling. Cute, I think. Asaba Kazuma did not have any dreams that disturbed Shiina Kane. Last night, the two of them stayed up all night for 2 consecutive nights. After coming out of the laboratory, they wanted to just lie down when they got home. But Heian insisted on not going to bed first, taking a bath first, and then changing into her boyfriend's shirt. Kinyu Fengjian never hesitated and still followed her wishes. Now it seems that it is a good thing that he has not given up. After all, it is the end of the year and the weather is getting colder. After a while, he wants to see her wearing so little at home. She is willing, but he is afraid that she will freeze. He slowly looked through his latest physical examination information and frowned slightly. This information shows that the stability of his gene chain has been alleviated to a certain extent as he began to regularly inject the current version of the gene stabilizing reagent. But since he has too many adjusted gene chains, he needs more natural stabilizers. Of course, as for why not inject more gene stabilizing reagents and rely on quantity to win, this is the same as when athletes say there is not a drop of urine in the stimulants during urine tests. It is just a joke and should not be taken seriously. But it has to be said that now that the two have joined forces, the development plan for an improved version of the gene stabilizing reagent has been released, and the crisis of gene activation can be postponed for a while. In this way, it can be regarded as buying him a lot of time. But, as the saying goes, treating the symptoms does not cure the root cause. He quietly approached Shiina Yuan. She was lying on the sofa sleeping. It seemed that she had stayed up late for 2 consecutive days, and her face lacked color. Her cold white skin looked like hoarfrost on her fingers in the early morning sun. Kazuma. She mumbled in a daze. I am here. After he finished speaking, he realized that she had never been awake. He laughed dumbly, gently lifted the ends of her hair, looked at her beautiful but somewhat depressed expression, and pecked it gently. Thanks for your hard work, he whispered. As if feeling his familiar breathing, her originally frowning expression gradually relaxed, her arms moved restlessly, her boyfriend's shirt was lifted slightly, and she instinctively wrapped her body around him. Then, there was a feeling of weightlessness. She kept curling up in the direction of Asaba Kazuma and fell off the sofa. The feeling of weightlessness made her wake up instantly. Before he could react, he fell into a warm embrace. How could it still fall, he said helplessly. Xianayuan, who had just woken up, was a little dazed and seemed to have not yet reacted. Subconsciously, she arched into his arms. An indescribable sense of peace filled the air, and then I realized that this was not a dream, but a real person. Ah! She let out a cry of shame. Kinya Kazuma said with a teasing smile, "What's wrong? You won't be clingy now when you wake up." Shianakian gritted her teeth. Seeing Asaba Kazuma being so arrogant, she stretched out her legs and wrapped her around him. "Don't move." Kinha Kazuma, who felt that he was asking for trouble, pushed her. If this continued, he felt something might really happen. "Okay." She curled her lips, and the voice in her throat was so sweet that it almost melted away. "You can sleep peacefully. Those people outside have started talking nonsense these days." Kinya Kazuma said helplessly. Shianakian shook his head, "There is nothing we can do about this. We ourselves need this kind of controversy. We can still afford the cost for the preliminary work. After all, we need the support of relevant forces." Asahi Kazuma nodded. Now that the two of them have made their goals clear, they naturally have to figure out how to take the next step. When a scientific research project develops to the end, it is difficult to support it solely through individual efforts. Therefore, the two of them need to create a general trend. They don't need to create a genius persona, they are both geniuses. There is no need to play the tricks of academic daji, because they themselves are the front line of scientific research. Over the years, Shianakane's examination results have been steadily at the forefront even for a long time. No one could shake her throne. Some people in the violin world also praised her, saying that she is a real genius girl. The same is true for you. After a period of tutoring by Xianayuan, your academic ability has been greatly improved. Even in the special class, you have been among the top 3 in the class for several quizzes. This kind of academic ability is obviously not enough to convince others. After all, among the top students in Bian High School every year, there are not many who can gain a firm foothold in the academic world. But you have too many identities. Popular light novelist, cartoonist of popular works in Weekly Shonen Jump, general supervisor of new animation studio projects, and has even begun to make a name for himself in the traditional painting circle. It is said that your annual income will soar to 1 billion yen next year. Someone even investigated the biological laboratory where you two did research, and revealed that the rental fee of the laboratory depends entirely on your royalties. There is no doubt that you are geniuses. Just show your true face and it will be enough to amaze the whole world. It didn't take long for you to attract the attention of the Genji group. The scene unfolds. Location: in a rented research room. Asaba Kazuma and Shianakian were sitting at attention. Standing opposite them was Dr. Funakoshi Hayato. He was looking at the two of them with an awkward look on his face. His eyes were a little dodgy, and he did not dare to look directly at Asaba Kazuma. "Mr. Kinyu, I'm sorry." There was a look of shame on his face. Asaba Kazuma shook his head, knowing that Dr. Funakoshi felt ashamed because the secret of his physical examination report was exposed. However, this kind of thing has long been expected by Kinyu Kazuma. Or, he had already guessed that this would be the result. In the final analysis, these physical examination data need to go through the hands of Genji Medical. The fact that the data has been concealed until now is the result of Dr. Funakoshi's great help. Not to mention, his eyes turned to a girl sitting in front of Funakoshi Hayato. This information was originally sent to Genji on purpose by him. Now that they have gained enough attention, it is the best time to cooperate with the consortium. Working with consortiums requires skill. But now, at this time, it is just right. The girl who was sitting with a dignified posture stopped, considering her eyes. When she looked at Asaba Kazuma and Shianayuan, she slightly suppressed her strength and said in a gentle voice, "Mr. Asaba, and Ms. Shiana, please wait." I am the person speaking for the Genji group this time. We've traveled through Tokyo, who still wants to simulate love? Author, Fei Se Huasiang. Chapter 86. Mr. Asaba, and Ms. Shiina, please wait. I am the person speaking for the Genji group this time. Asahi Kazuma glanced at this woman twice, and suddenly felt that this person was a bit familiar, but she couldn't remember who it was. However, there was a sharp light in this girl's eyes. As expected, she should be a very strong person in reality. But the world loves genius scientists even more. Even capital is willing to treat virtuous people in order to earn greater profits. At least from the voice of the speaker of the Genji group, although there is a hint of calculation, it is more of a surprise. After judging the situation, Asahi Kazuma raised a faint smile on his lips and said, Genji wants to collaborate on our research project. The girl nodded seriously, with a bright smile on her face. Mr. Asaba, Genji Group has enough respect and trust for you too. What we invest in is people, and you two are the territory we have always expected to cooperate with. Chien Kazuma shook his head and said, is it because of the special genes we both have? The girl smiled and said nothing, which was equivalent to acquiescence. Asa Kazuma tapped her fingers lightly on the table, once, twice, 3 times. The smiling expression on the girl's face did not change. After a while, Chien Fengma suddenly said, Genji, do you still want to continue research on the void gene? The internal name of the gene Genji is now adjusted. Why not? Now everyone knows that void gene is the future of the next 100 years. If you want us to help you complete your research on adjusting genes, no problem, we can. Seeing the unabashed joy in the girl's eyes, Chien Fengjian added lightly, you guys will prepare a more advanced laboratory for me. You will be responsible for the relevant research funds. If we recruit more qualified scientific research agriculturists and produce relevant research results, and the conditions are not too different, we will give priority to cooperation with Genji. Are there any problems? No problem. Also, we will allocate a separate research fund of 1 billion yen. We will borrow some of the equipment in the laboratory to simultaneously promote another research project. Of course, if there are relevant results, we will also give priority to cooperation with Genji. If there are problems. A trace of hesitation flashed in the eyes of the person speaking to Genji, but after a moment he said seriously, we agree on this matter. Seeing this, Asahi Kazuma raised his eyes, thought for a moment, and finally turned his head to look at Shiina and said, Hien, what do you think? She gently reached out and grabbed Kinya Kazuma's hand, and said with a soft light in her eyes, I will listen to you. Kinya Kazuma nodded, then turned to look at the speaker and said, then, happy working together. You have reached a consensus with Genji Group. Genji Group has a strong foundation as an established consortium, it controls a considerable number of high-quality assets and huge cash flow. You know that the Genji Group has been deploying adjusters in related fields. They are actually a very good partner, provided that you have taken the initiative. You have investigated the relevant plans of Genji Group in recent years. They have always been expanding their overseas layout and expanding their industrial channels. Generally speaking, they are based on high-end manufacturing, biomedicine, and the internet. You and Shiina may become their king bomb in the future, and they will be their long-term business card to the world. If even the country's outstanding scientific research geniuses are hindered by the Genji Group, then the moons from outside may not dare to pour their moonlight on Genji. Soon, not long after the agreement was reached between the two of you, Genji, after obtaining the consent of you and Shiina, began to counterattack the public opinion. The label of genius has been slapped on both of you. When the genius comes to an end based on his achievements, half of the noisy public opinion environment is instantly cleared. When capital also comes to get involved, the remaining noise disappears. This year, you have not yet become a third-year student, but you have received an invitation from the Faculty of Medicine of the University of Tokyo to enter your studies. I couldn't wait for you to pass another year, but the Faculty of Medicine of the University of Tokyo can't wait. The scene unfolds. At the gate of the University of Tokyo, Shiana Kane's mouth corners were slightly curved, her eyelashes were trembling slightly. She looked at Asaba Kazuma with a funny look on her face and said, "You can't call me senior sister now." After the slight smile on her face dissipated, she said seriously, "That's good, for you and me, without the burden of study, we can devote ourselves to research faster." Asahi Kazuma nodded. The attitude of the University of Tokyo is very obvious, which is to directly bind people and honors to the university. There is no need to doubt whether colleges and universities will do this kind of thing. A classmate Asaba Kazuma knew in his previous life was still an undergraduate. Because he was working on a project with his teacher, he was deeply affiliated with the project. Later, his teacher moved from an ordinary school to a 985 university with a project, and that classmate was treated as a packaged project, and his student status was transferred to that university together. Although this kind of thing is rare, it is not unheard of. It just depends on whether your project has such value. Obviously, their project is also of sufficient value to Dongda. If Dongda doesn't take action, there are many Ivy League colleges and universities that are greedy for honor and talent and extend their olive branch. But Asahi Kazuma seemed a little unhappy. Shiana Kane looked at him curiously and said, "If you can directly determine the result, shouldn't you smile more?" Kinha Kazuma spread his hands and said, "I originally wanted to rely on my iron strength to get into the University of Tokyo with the highest score in the country in the next semester, but I never thought that they had already surrendered before I took action, so forget it." He said with a sad face, "Now that we are at the same level, your senior attribute is gone. Isn't this a huge loss?" Shiana Uman was angry and funny. She stretched out her slender fingers and poked Asaba Kazuma's waist. She knew that he was very ticklish there. After making her little boyfriend laugh, she said nothing more, but held his hand tightly, unable to speak for a long time. She noticed that he had grown a little taller. When they first met him, he was just a little taller than her, but by the end of the next semester, she already had to raise her head to ask for a kiss. Now, she actually needs to stand on tiptoes. As for why, she knew, the moment she greeted him at the school gate, she couldn't help but stand up on tiptoes and kiss his lips. After a brief kiss, the two slowly separated. Asaba Kazuma stroked her crimson cheek and said, "From now on, I won't be able to call you senior at home. It seems I have to find a way to change her name to something more exciting." Shiana Kane instinctively thought of some titles that often appeared in the Torana's Den book, and then blushed. She gritted her teeth, wanting to refuse. After all, this is too shameful. But when he thought that the two of them had been racing against time, he was afraid that Asahi Kazuma would give up the idea. She wanted to stay with him a little longer, a little longer. Wait until the two of them can no longer walk, and then leave happily with a happy smile and the hug of the children. The research will definitely be successful. She held Asahi Kazuma's hand tightly, hesitated for a moment, then blushed in shame, and said in his ear, "Master, I still want to give you children." 5. Qian Yufengjian burst out laughing, and said angrily and funnily, "How afraid are you that I won't be able to think about it?" After a moment, his eyes softened a little, but, "My heart is indeed moved." Shiana Qian's eyes were bright and gazing, with a hint of smile at the corner of her eyes. She also took action. "Towards the end of the year, Genji Group has prepared a laboratory for you." In the same month, the improved version of the gene stabilizing reagent project was completed. At this point, the project has very little room for improvement and cannot achieve a breakthrough in the short term. You and Shiana Yuan set your sights on another field to see if you can solve the problem from the root. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. We've traveled through Tokyo, who still wants to simulate love? Author, Fei Se Huixiang. Chapter 87. The field you are targeting this time is based on the extended application of CRISPR and Fanzer protein systems, hoping to use gene therapy, in vivo treatment and in vitro treatment. At present, CRISPR gene editing technology is more mature whether it is in vivo or in vitro treatment. There are relatively complete gene therapies, and there are also successful cases. The Fanzer system has not been around for a long time, but in the long run, it will be more with development potential. Xiana Yuan prefers the more complete CRISPR, but you told her that the current technical concept of gene stabilization reagents is basically developed based on the Fanzer protein system, and we should continue to work in this field. In the end, she was convinced by you, and the two of them started new research. Relevant research on Genji's side mainly involves technical personnel, under the leadership of you two, gradually replicating the pre-technical theory of gene stabilizing reagents. More research funds will be used by you two to observe and study new development ideas of the Fanzer protein system. The research projects related to adjusters currently invested by Genji Group are disclosed to you. You saw a very familiar name in it, Tatsuo Fujiki, and you had an interesting idea in your mind. A month later, with the conscious promotion of you and Xiana Yuan, several more experimental results were released, and they were published in journals in different fields such as Nature and The Lancet. There was another public uproar, and not long after, the source of news from the Genji Group came to the door. The scene unfolds. The speaker of the Genji Group who came this time had changed. A subordinate who had been with the reporter before appeared in front of Asaba Kazuma. You two really gave us a big surprise. With unconcealable joy on his face, the news talker said seriously. Public opinion outside has become boiling now, but this time, no media will jump out and point fingers at you. Asaba Kazuma nodded and said with a smile, this experiment went so well, which is indeed a bit beyond my expectation. I can only say that Genji still has capable people. The speaker was stunned for a moment, then quietly hid his doubtful eyes and said. It seems that some projects led by Genji have given you some inspiration. This is really the best thing. Previously, the internal research progress was disclosed in order to promote each other. Now it seems that this move is the right move. Asayu Kazuma nodded and said with a smile, that's indeed the case. I would also like to congratulate you. The speaker said curiously, oh? How do you say this? Xiana Kane followed the words and praised him and said, I see that Professor Fujiki, whom you support, must have made some breakthroughs, so I would like to congratulate him in advance. The speaker was thoughtful, and after a moment he said, Professor Fujiki. I remember correctly, he is mainly leading the breakthrough in the direction of gene induction reagents, and the purpose is to explore the possibility of future artificial void gene owners. Asaba Kazuma nodded and said, we have learned about Professor Fujiki's research progress and the academic papers he has published in the past 2 years. He should have made good progress in this area. After all, whether it is gene induction reagents or gene stabilization reagents, they are all based on different research directions of the Fanzer protein system, and their progress should not be much slower than ours. The speaker raised his head and asked, Mr. Asaba, I heard that Professor Fujiki has not yet achieved any significant results, and there is a big gap between the progress here and yours. Asahi Kazuma pretended to be confused for a moment, then shook his head and said, that shouldn't be the case. I see the situation on his side. Even if the most rudimentary human experiments on gene induction reagents have been started, it is considered normal. The speaker asked warmly, but we have consulted relevant researchers. Although Professor Fujiki's progress is a bit delayed, there are not many problems. Asaba Kazuma and Xiana Kane looked at each other in astonishment. After a moment, Asaba Kazuma said helplessly. Then there should be a gap in understanding between us. After that, he kept silent about Tatsuo Fujiki's affairs. It was not until the speaker had a detailed discussion on the research and future cooperation intentions between the two people that the two parties reached a consensus, and then he breathed a sigh of relief and said, "Then I'll leave the rest of the research in this area to you two. It's easy to talk about." Kinyo Kazuma smiled happily. The cooperative attitude of the Genji group is unexpectedly correct. You can hear from the speaker that there should be other plans behind this, but you can basically be sure that this plan is not aimed at you. On the contrary, it was Genji who needed your strength to plan other opponents, so he compromised on your demands several times. This also gives you a little relief. As long as I don't interfere with your plan, everything will be easy to talk about. Before leaving, you sent the speaker out of the laboratory, and when you were about to turn around and leave, the speaker suddenly asked you, "Are you sure there is a problem with Professor Fujiki's progress? We've traveled through Tokyo, who still wants to simulate love?" Author, Fei Se Hui-Xiang. Chapter 88. Her pressure is increasing, and as she carries the weight of her lover's life on her back, she feels a suffocating pressure. She is very scared. It's another year's cultural festival of being high school. You go back to school and dance together under the moonlight. The candy apples, the little white dress, and her smile while dancing together have become the most unforgettable memories. She seems to have become a little more energetic. You smile and tell her not to have too many worries, as long as you do your best, there will be no regrets. She shook her head and told you that if you fail, it will be a pity. Seeing Christmas Eve approaching, while you were conducting tests on the introduction of exogenous supplementary sexual function genes into target cells, your mind suddenly went blank and your body fell into a trance. You were supported by Shianayuin on the side. When she sensed something was wrong, she immediately sent you to Genji Medical. With the operating light turned on, the experiment lasted for half an hour. The attending doctor, Hayato Funakoshi, is the one who knows your situation best among the current medical staff of Genji Medical. When the operating room opened, you were pushed out while you were still sleeping under anesthesia. Shianayuin nervously asked about the results. Hayato Funakoshi looked solemn. He told her that this emergency treatment used Genji's latest achievements in this field, and your abnormal state has been suppressed. Shianayuin breathed a sigh of relief, but seeing Dr. Funakoshi's solemn expression, she knew that things were not that simple. The scene unfolds. Hayato Funakoshi, who was wearing a mask, said with a serious expression on his face, "One good news, one bad news. The good news is that some attachment technologies extended from the two theoretical results can have a more obvious inhibitory effect on Mr. Kinyo's gene activation. The bad news is that even if the two laboratories successfully prepare a gene-stabilizing reagent, there may not be a way to completely cure his problem." Shianayuin has mixed feelings of joy and sorrow. Fortunately, Genji has already begun the development of experimental instruments and related technologies for the regulator's downstream industry. Coupled with the upgraded gene stabilization reagent that he and she have already mastered, at least in the short term, there is no need to worry too much about the problem. The worry is that even with the assistance of Genji medical-related technical products, there is still no way to fundamentally solve his problem. That night, Asahi Kazuma woke up. Shianakane relayed the doctor's words to him, and she instinctively put his current condition in a lighter tone. She was scared. He was afraid that he would lose hope of survival. Unexpectedly, the person who responded to her was Kinyo Kazuma's bright smile. "Don't cry with a sad face, it looks strange. I still like the way you look with your head held high and your face proud." The tone was so relaxed that Shianakane almost thought that what happened in the operating room was like a dream, and said with a helpless smile, "You are quite confident. There's no way, it's useless to continue thinking about it. The most important thing now is to continue our research. Trust me, everything will be fine." He gently stroked the tip of her hair. It was probably early winter, and the leaves outside the ward window turned yellow and fell quietly. The evening wind that should have been bleak blew in, but because she was here, the cold wind didn't feel biting. Let's go. The treatment with external technology is pretty good, but if you want to recover, you have to use the latest gene stabilizing reagents. Xianyuan nodded. No one knows better than her that the only way to truly extend his life now is a gene stabilizing reagent. By the time the two of them completed the discharge procedures, it was already half an hour later. Before Christmas, it started to snow lightly. The two of them stood quietly in the fine snow. Xianakian stretched out her hand, watched the snowflakes melt after falling on her palm, and said softly, "It's so beautiful." "What you said, didn't you see that it melted away when it touched you?" Kinya Kazuma pinched her small nose and said with a smile. Xianakian's cheeks were slightly red. Thinking of the not-so-long experience after meeting him, I laughed quietly. After meeting him, she cried and blushed more often than she had in all the previous times combined. Although she sometimes suffered from emotional ups and downs, she never regretted it. She turned her head and took a look. At that moment, a slightly larger snowflake fell on his head. "Fengjian, you have snow on your head, let me take it off for you." She stood on her tiptoes slightly. It had been almost 2 years since they met. He seemed to have grown a little taller, and now she needed to raise her hand to reach him. "Stand still for a moment." She gently swept away the snow, then leaned into his ear and said, "I took it off." Qian Yufengjian was helpless. He obviously felt that Ian was becoming more and more attractive now. Of course, he's not annoying at all. On the contrary, it is very useful. "Thank you for your hard work," he said. Xianakian shook her head and said with a smile, "It's not hard, as long as I stay by your side, I can be myself. No matter it's me in my heart or me on the surface, my lies or my truth, you can all see it. I like Kazuma like this the best." Asahi Kazuma held her hand a little tighter. "You are back home, and there are sealed bottles of improved gene stabilization reagents in the refrigerator at home. As the cold reagent is injected into the blood vessel, a faint cold feeling spreads throughout the body, and you begin to feel drowsy." Xianuman knows that this is a normal phenomenon after the reagent takes effect. After lying down on the bed, you couldn't resist the sleepiness and fell asleep. After a long time, a phone call wakes you up. The scene unfolds. At this time, the night has passed, and the sky is bright outside the window. Asaba Kazuma slowly stood up, and Xianakane quietly poked her head out from under the quilt, revealing her somewhat messy long hair. Asaba Kazuma made a quiet gesture and then began to deal with the person on the other side of the phone. "Hey, Mom, why do you want to call me all of a sudden?" Xianakian's ears twitched slightly, and a female voice came from the other end of the phone. "Why, I can't come to you if I have nothing to do." "Look what you said, aren't you curious? Didn't Asami tell you about my current situation when she went back last time? So where is my wife? It's been so long, and I haven't even seen a photo of my wife. I don't have the habit of taking pictures myself. If you really want to see her, just come to Tokyo directly. I won't stop you," Qian Yufengjian said calmly. Then, while he was listening to the phone, Xianakian quietly raised her head, went over and kissed the corner of his lips. She didn't make a sound, just kissed him quietly and unhurriedly, and didn't let him go until she spoke again on the other end of the phone. "Qian Yufengjian is a bit sitting on wax. This annoying little goblin didn't bother him when he was talking. He would kiss him from time to time in between words, so that the warmth of their bodies could melt together." Asahi Kazuma had been dealing with what her mother said on the other end of the phone, and she was so teased that she became so angry that she even started to tossing her pajamas. Then her face started to turn red. After a long time, when he hung up the phone and he was about to punish her, she suddenly raised her head, revealing her hazy sleepy eyes, buried her face in his chest, and said in a sweet voice with a hint of sleepiness, "Kazima. Kazima. Kazima." She rubbed his body slowly and called his name repeatedly without saying anything else. The warmth in those eyes seemed to melt people completely. Finally, she opened her mouth, gently scraped his slightly sweaty upper body with her little tiger teeth, and said in a dull voice, "I miss you." Qian Yufengjian heard helplessly. He has never left, why is he still acting like a spoiled child? But still very happy to hear her say that. You jokingly ask her how much of this version of 100 Things I Want to Do with Kazuma has been completed now. Xianauman gently licked your fingers and said casually, many simple ones have been basically tasted. When she said this, she gently rubbed your hot body, and then snickered and said, would you like me to meet our parents, /. We've traveled through Tokyo, who still wants to simulate love. Author, Fei Se Huixiang. Chapter 89. The frequency of your physical examinations by Dr. Funakoshi is gradually increasing at present, your condition is quite good, and your energy seem to have recovered a lot. Because your condition has improved, your research progress has begun to speed up during this period, and you have spent more and more time immersed in the laboratory. Because she is concerned about your body, Xiana Yuan now begins to control your meals most of the time. She will take time to prepare meals for you. Every time you start eating bento in the laboratory, the faces of other researchers in the laboratory will always show envy and jealousy, because your beloved wife's bento is always rich. As spring passes, you find that Xiana Yuan has been secretly looking at you more and more recently. The scene unfolds. Tokyo is starting to get hotter. That night, after finishing the experiment, Xiana Kane wore a neat lady's dress and walked with him in the surrounding park after finishing the experiment. Do you have any plans recently? Xiana Kane whispered. Qian Yufengjian looked at her with some confusion and said, isn't it the same as before, where you should study and eat? Xiana Kane turned her head and looked at a neatly manicured lawn in the park, without looking at him. She wore a single ponytail today, revealing her two cute ears, which seemed to be a little red because the weather was a bit hot. Kinyu Kazuma didn't say much, he just held her hand like this. After a while, Xiana Kane, who still didn't get a response from him, let go of his hand somewhat unhappily. He took a few long strides to catch up with Asaba Kazuma, walked in front of him, and bent down with his hands on his waist, looking unhappy. Explain. Did you forget something? Asahi Kazuma raised a smile on her lips and said, oh, I remembered, I have to attend an academic forum recently. Xiana Kane pouted, what else? There is one more thing that I have a vague impression of. Of course, if there is a young lady with a single ponytail who can take the initiative to give me a kiss now, maybe I can remember it directly. Asaba Kazuma obediently walked to a chair in the park next to him and sat down. He raised his head and showed a provocative look. A trace of helplessness and amusement flashed in Xiana Kane's eyes. He walked over and sat on him, savagely. He gave me a warm and wet kiss. Asahi Kazuma's nose twitched slightly, and she said with a smile, blue water, it reminds me of you every time. Blue water perfume is the classic perfume of the Miu Miu family, whose slogan is I want to sit with you until dusk, dance until morning, the earth is dark and the sky is dark, and my life is wasted. Asaba Kazuma had previously thought that the meaning of orphan was not good, and Xiana Yuan felt that the fruity fragrance of Inversion Paris was too unorthodox, so they finally chose this perfume that could suit both of their preferences. He looked at her shy eyes and said with a smile, you must have waited a long time. Xiana Kane nodded, so tomorrow. The clothes have been chosen, he smiled, and after a moment he said, yours too. Xiana Kane was surprised, where did you find the data on my figure? The corners of Asahi Kazuma's eyes rose slightly, when someone is asleep, no matter what I do, there will be no reaction. Xiana Kane snorted, but still took out a small box from her arms and said seriously, happy birthday. Kinyu Kazuma took it smoothly, with a cheerful smile on his face, it will be a few more minutes until March 10th. March 10th is his birthday. The time is still 23:56 on March 9th. Strictly speaking, it is indeed not time to say happy birthday yet. Shianakane was not in a hurry, and said with a smile, "It doesn't matter, just treat it as a gift in advance. Anyway, when the time comes, I will have a better gift to give to you when you are 18 years old. Then let me look forward to it for a while," he said with a smile. "Can I open the gift first?" Shianayuin nodded. He carefully opened the bow on the gift box. Although he looked careless just now, he was actually very happy when he received the gift. After opening the gift box, Asahikazuma saw an exquisite pocket watch inside. The time on the pocket watch ticked and quickly reached midnight. Shianakane took out the pocket watch inside and carefully put it in his jacket pocket. She always thought that Asahikazuma had a noble prince-like free and easy attitude that was difficult for ordinary people to match. You are 18 years old. You need to have a suitable outfit. The workmanship of Albert's watch chain is very fine. This kind of dress that was popular in the Victorian era is quite suitable for matching with a suit with a straight lapel collar. For a walking hormone like Asahikazuma, it can express his free and easy temperament to the fullest. Of course, that's not the point. Shianakane raised her head and looked at him infatuatedly, imprinting his eyes as bright as moonlight into her heart. The ribbon that had just been removed from the gift box was carefully wrapped around her hand, tied into a bow, and then stretched out, with uncontrollable joy in her voice. "I have already told my parents that now that you have been accepted into my family, I can come directly to you in the future and we can always be together." She said this frustratedly, and then added a little embarrassedly, "I mean, I've packed myself up for you, and you don't want your wife." There was a rare hint of fear in her voice, and she kept looking up at him, like a prisoner on the gallows waiting for trial. Qian Yufengjian felt that the raging emotions in his heart were about to drown him. He slowly untied the bow tied on her hand, with a warm sun-like smile on his face, and the moonlight was quietly misty, as if she was shy because of him. "Want?" This is the second time he has said this. But he had a feeling it wouldn't be the last time. He had made an agreement with her before. When they reach the legal age, they can get married naturally. She wants to treasure that night when the moon is bright and shy. It is the happiest moment in her life. The next day, you put on a custom-made suit, and she wore a wedding dress and carefully tied the Albert watch chain to your suit in this strange way. You registered your marriage at the marriage registration office. From today on, she is Mrs. Asaba, and even her name has changed from Shiana Uman to Asaba Uman in accordance with Japanese customs. Your relationship is getting closer. Another 6 months have passed, and your experiments have made rapid progress. You have spent more and more time in the laboratory researching. Sometimes, you hope that she can put down her research and go back to rest early. She rarely listens to you and shakes her head to tell you that she is fine. Whenever you want to ask her to go back, she will slyly press her face to your chest, listen to your heartbeat, and tell you her own feelings through her actions unwilling. You still feel soft, because you know that she did this all for you. You are inseparable, and many students at the University of Tokyo have heard good things about you. In the year when you were just a sophomore, you were admitted as an associate professor at the Faculty of Medicine at the University of Tokyo, and you were in the limelight for a while. Based on the adjusted gene data sampled from various adjusters that have been collected so far, you have begun to calculate the supplementary functional gene equation that maintains the gene chain from further activation. According to the current thinking, as long as the supplementary functional gene equation can be deduced successfully, a one-to-one customized genetic adjustment reagent plan can be made based on the adjuster's current physical condition. Although they are also blood injections, the main purpose of gene adjustment reagents will no longer be to stabilize genes, but to build a bridge for multiple adjustment genes to take effect at the same time by supplementing the influence of functional genes. Gene stabilizing reagents block the active path of adjusted genes, while gene adjusting reagents believe that blocking is worse than opening up. Instead of making too many restrictions, it is better to customize supplementary functional genes that are compatible with different adjusted genes for different adjusted genes. It can be expected that the calculation and derivation of the most critical supplementary functional gene equation will be a difficult problem with a large amount of engineering. But you are happy with it, this is your only hope now. The frequency of your medical check UPS at Genji has dropped a lot. Another half year has passed, and the calculation and derivation of equations are still going on. Maybe it's because you have stayed in the laboratory for too long recently, and you feel a little tired recently, you have gotten up later. Asabakane hopes you have a good rest, you shake your head and say it's okay. In the next few days, your wake-up time returned to normal, as if her worries before were all a dream. Another day passed and the alarm clock you set failed to wake you up. She was startled and forced you to go to Genji Medical Clinic. The scene unfolds. He looked at his wife with a guilty conscience, shook his head and said, "No, I feel like I'm in pretty good shape lately." Shianauman said seriously, "It's okay, just like before, just go and check it out." Seeing Shianauman's mood gradually becoming more agitated, it was obvious that she noticed something from his attitude. In the end, Asaba Kazuma couldn't defeat her and was taken to Genji medical treatment. He had a hunch that after this time, it would not be so easy for him to leave the hospital. That's why he was so greedy that he wanted to stay, refused to go for a physical examination, and wanted to spend more time with her instead of letting her go into the unknown future alone. However, what she expected was the silence of Dr. Funakoshi. Is the worst outcome. The most troublesome situation. Kinya Kazuma sighed softly. He was forcefully placed on Genji's bed by Dr. Funakoshi. His current problem was a bit serious, and he even alerted the director of Genji Medical to personally come to stay with him. If one of the famous biomedical twins were admitted to the hospital due to a break in the gene chain activation gene chain, which may even cause cell cancer at any time, or even gene collapse, the whole world would be shocked. There was a sound of footsteps in the corridor. Asayu Kazuma broke away from his empty thoughts and looked at the figure at the door, with a warm smile on his face. Shianakian looked at him quietly. The dean on the side seemed to know that he was getting in the way, so he patted him on the shoulder without saying anything, and then left the ward. She blinked her dark eyes and finally whispered, "You should have a good rest next." Kinya Kazuma shook his head. He thinks in a different way than she does, because he knows that he still has a chance to be resurrected, and if possible, he hopes to fight with her until the last moment. If one simulation doesn't work, just do it twice. If 2 simulations don't work, then do it 3 times. Having found his way, he could finally have a perfect ending. But as she hugged him silently, her body kept shaking. Even without hearing the tone, he could still detect her fear. The feeling of losing him would drive her crazy. Logically speaking, it is the best solution for both of them to go all out. But many things are not the optimal solution, that is, the best solution for her. He wasn't that afraid of death. Even in the simulation, he hoped that she could be happier. It has always been like this, and it will always be like this. Is it fair to her that he himself gave up the hope of living and only found a way to save himself as much as possible? Unfair. It may even lead to extremely painful consequences. For example, that shot would hit her across time, countless years in advance. Didn't he want to know this? So, he finally looked at her and said in an extremely soft voice, "You're going to have a hard time next." Shianakane's sad expression calmed down and she returned to her confident look. She kissed the corners of his lips gently, as if she couldn't get enough. One time at a time, one time at a time. It was as if he wanted to take all the missing kisses in one go. It wasn't until her lips were slightly swollen that she reluctantly stopped and said, "It'll be okay, just wait for me." After speaking, he turned around, his nose twitched and his voice was choked. Kinya Kazuma hugged her from behind, held her hand in front of her, and said softly, "I trust you." You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. We've traveled through Tokyo, who still wants to simulate love? Author, Fei Se Hui-Xiang. Chapter 90. Xianwumen's work is starting to get busy. Sometimes you have a video call with her late at night, and she still stays in the laboratory and doesn't want to come out. This makes you very angry. Even if the research is important, you still hope that this is research she conducts on the premise of caring for herself. Aware of your unhappiness, she calmed down a lot, and began to plan her research and life more effectively. Unless she really can't spare time, she will spend some time every day to accompany you. Sometimes, she will bring the latest research results and give them to you to let you know her current progress. You feel the weakness of your body. I don't know when it started, but you started to feel that your body became sluggish. Sometimes after standing up and moving for a long time, you will feel a tearing feeling all over your body. This moment makes you mistakenly think that you have become a fragile glass bottle. On this day, you fainted in front of the bed again. When you opened your eyes again, what you saw was her panicked face. The scene unfolds. On the white hospital bed, Asaba Kazuma, who looked a little thinner, sat on the bedside, looking at Shianakane in a trance. Her eyes were fixed on the piece of apple in her hand. She peeled it carefully, and the circles of peel slipped from her hands. After peeling it clean, she cut it into 8 pieces and fed them to Kinha Kazuma's mouth. "Eat," she said. Kinha Kazuma opened his mouth and bit it. Because she fed them, the apple seemed to taste a little better than normal. Asaba Kazuma raised his head and looked at the ceiling, thought about it seriously and said, "It seems that the situation is a bit troublesome now. There is not much time left for the gene stabilizing reagent to suppress gene activation." "Wait for me," Shianakane said while holding back her calmness. "Well, it's not a big problem. Although there isn't much time, it can last for a while longer." He blinked and pretended to be relaxed, "Only if you don't avoid me." "How is that possible? Not every experiment requires me to keep an eye on it all the time. I would like to spend more time with you." Her voice was very soft. "Are you comfortable with the environment here at Genji Medical? If you don't adapt, I will find a medical team specifically." "I'm quite used to it. Genji is also a partner of ours. Someone from their group should say hello. Apart from some physical discomfort after conservative treatment, most of the time I feel that my overall condition is much better." The two were silent for a moment. After a long time, Asaba Kazuma gently stroked her hair and said, "I plan to activate a backup plan." "Backup plan?" She frowned. "Listen, Heian, with the current medical technology, it is basically impossible to ensure that I am safe and sound. In fact, you and I also agree on this point." She subconsciously grabbed his hand, fearing that he would run away like this again. "Did you read the test results from Genji's pathology room?" he said softly. She shook her head. "You are already unconscious. I have no thoughts." Asaba Kazuma rang the reminder bell on the bedside. Not long after, Hayato Funakoshi, who had been resting in the infirmary, walked in. After hearing the news that Asaba Kazuma asked to see the pathology report, he turned around and went out to take out the pathology report. When the pathology report was handed to him, he flipped it open and after a quick glance, he determined that his current condition had reached a very dangerous level. Even with the help of gene stabilization reagents, it won't be much better. As for which year, Asaba Kazuma knows why. At that time, until he finished Rina's simulation, he only had one adjustment gene, so he was able to spend the rest of his life in the simulation without incident. But after coming out of Rina's simulation, the number of adjustment genes in his body became 3. After the last simulation ended, the number of adjustment genes in the body became 4. With each additional adjustment gene, the instability of its own gene chain will increase. Even though the content of the natural stabilizer in his blood far exceeds that of ordinary adjusters, as the number of adjusted genes increases, the natural stabilizer in his blood becomes less stable. This is why he and she must study complementary functional genes. Only by understanding the endogenous logic between adjusting genes can we ensure that he will not be affected by the backlash of adjusting genes now, or even in the more distant future. He handed her the pathology report. There was no conversation between the two of them. She quietly read through the pathology report for 10 minutes, and then went to observe his samples under the microscope for a long time. Asahi Kazuma has been doing research with her for so long, and he has never seen her take so long to read a report. After a long time, she took off her white coat and returned to the ward, hugging him gently, not daring to look at him. Kinya Kazuma patted her shoulder and said, "Hien, I believe you have your own judgment." Shianakane didn't speak, she just hugged him dully. She tried to use 10 minutes of repeated arguments to overturn what she had learned in the first half of her life, just so that he could get rid of the pain. But, it's of no use. Funakoshi Hayato stood at the door, looking at the helpless scene inside, and sighed heavily. The white walls of the hospital have heard the most sincere prayers, and the seats next to them have been stained with helpless sighs. Shianakian remained silent. She could actually see it at a glance, but she couldn't accept the result at all. Because the object of the pathology report analysis was taken out of the body of her lover, her husband. Looking at the despair in the mist-covered black eyes, and the overwhelming feeling of black clouds looming over the city, you opened your mouth. There were a lot of things you wanted to say, but now you can't say them. Destiny takes 3 unknown paths here, you choose. Give up treatment and spend her last days with her. Start the artificial hibernation plan and try to reunite in the future. Ask Umi Asaba to speed up the experimental progress, and you will be the first human experimental patient of untested new results. In the simulation space, Qian Yufengjian looked at these 3 options quietly. Among these 3 options, the first one he gave up was option 1. When he gave up treatment, what was taken away was not one person's life, but his and hers. The option is a bit interesting. The artificial hibernation plan is often referred to as the frozen human experiment. A person is cryopreserved in order to seek breakthroughs in future medical technology, and then thawed to continue treatment. However, there is a problem with this option, and that is the cell necrosis caused by the freezing process. There is currently no reliable solution in the world. Even most of the contractors of the Human Dormancy Project have no medical research background behind them, and they were once regarded as commercial hype rather than an experimental medical method. However, Asahi Kazuma still recognized this option. Because among the supporting technologies for gene stabilization reagents, there is corresponding cryodormant technology. Although it is still not that mature, you can consider taking a gamble. Its supporting freezing liquid can be mixed with a certain dose of gene stabilizing reagent ingredients in equal proportions. In the dormant state, his metabolism will decrease. The same dose of gene stabilizing reagent can suppress gene activation more effectively. The only thing that needs to be considered is whether he can successfully unblock it. As for whether the problem of gene activation after unblocking can be solved, please, that's his wife, and he has unlimited trust in her. Option 3 is also a bet on life. Unlike other options, the bet this time is whether the current research results of Shianauman are effective enough. Choose cryohibernation? Or choose an untried new technology? This is a really difficult choice. After Asaba Kazuma thought for a moment, he finally eliminated option 3. It doesn't matter if he dies in the love simulation, he still has many opportunities anyway. However, it's okay if the experiment succeeds. If the experiment fails, God knows whether Hien will completely collapse after that. He was confident enough that supplementing the gene equation for sexual function was the answer, but he ran out of time. But it doesn't matter, she still has time. He can't finish this road, but the baton has been passed to her. Therefore, only option 2 can keep the hope in her heart as much as possible. Even though, he might not wake up. Choose. Asa Kazuma silently made her choice. You explained to her the not-so-mature human dormancy technology, and told her that it is impossible for the current technology to cure you, but it may not be possible in the future. You are right. 100 years ago, or even earlier, smallpox, the Black Death, tuberculosis, these diseases are all incurable, but on a time scale of hundreds of years, they spread very quickly, becomes less deadly. You used the shortest possible time to explain to her the principles of human dormancy that you had never explained before. She listened quietly to you and did not immediately agree or reject, but just looked at the ceiling in a daze. The scene unfolds. The future feels so far away. Who knows what the future will be like, she whispered. Kinya Kazuma shook his head. It won't be that far away. I have enough confidence in our experimental results, or, I have enough confidence in you. If you are more optimistic, maybe you have achieved a technological breakthrough in the past 3 or 4 years. Would it be lonely for you to sleep in there alone? Her voice was choked with sobs. Am I useless? If I could have produced research results earlier, you wouldn't. Kinya Kazuma gently rubbed her hair and said, it doesn't matter, you will be in the future world. After a while, he said to her with unspeakable melancholy, you too, you must be happy. Shianakane pursed her lips unhappily, only when you are by my side will you be happy. Kinya Kazuma said helplessly, then work hard. I hope to wake up again and see you with your head held high and proud. After saying this, Shianakane burst into laughter. Her smile is a bit like a plum blossom blooming in the cold, with a bit of a bright smile in her delicacy. He couldn't hold it back and nibbled at her lipstick forcefully. He didn't have much time to wake up. He wanted to remember every smell on her body. Under the guidance of the technical information you gave, Shianayuin temporarily put down the relevant research work. The human dormancy technology supporting gene stabilization reagents was mainly developed during a certain period by Heian because the technical conditions of the stabilization reagents were not mature enough in order to allow some adjusters who could no longer bear it to plan for the future. It was specially developed as an alternative technology. This human dormancy technology is not perfect enough. In the last simulation, MRS Canva could only guarantee that 30% of people would recover from several years of hibernation, and the longer the hibernation time, the lower the possibility of thaw and recovery. But you still firmly chose this path, waiting for the unfinished sunrise. You firmly believe that you are a lucky person, so you can meet them. The night is only temporary, it will be fine when the day comes. System prompt, you have unlocked the unfinished achievement sunrise. Achievement point add 1. We've traveled through Tokyo, who still wants to simulate love? Author, Fei Se Hui-Xiang. Chapter 91. Deep in the Genji Medical Affiliated Research Center, in a special laboratory that has strong earthquake resistance and can guarantee water and power supply for more than half a month after a disaster, a brand new machine that looks like a game warehouse is placed in the laboratory, the center of the room. At first glance, that thing looks a bit like a dormant warehouse for the wind in the near future. This is the culmination of the artificial hibernation technology that Shianauman, with the help of Genji, worked hard to complete during this period. With the ready-made theory and the cooperation of Shianakian, coupled with Genji Medical's heavy investment, this instrument was successfully assembled in a very short time. Standing here now, in addition to Shianakian, are also the person in charge of the Genji Group, the Dean of Genji Medical, and a considerable number of scientific research staff. The person in charge of the Genji Group didn't look too young anymore. He just looked at the instrument quietly for a long time, and then suddenly sighed. No matter how long it takes, I will always be amazed by the speed of contemporary technological advancement. If the results of this research can be carried out smoothly, it means that traditional incurable diseases may become a thing of the past. On a long time scale, the incurable diseases of our era may become easily overcome, just like tuberculosis back then. Not to mention years of sleep, even if it can delay a serious illness for a day or two, or even a few hours, it can create a glimmer of hope for many patients. The premise is that the results of this research are successful. The head of Genji turned his attention to Asaba Kazuma on the hospital bed and Shiina Yuin sitting next to him. When the two sit together, it will really give people a pleasing feeling. It's a pity that the scenery has become less beautiful because of Asaba Kazuma's body's weakness and paleness. Genji's favor can actually be used in more valuable ways, but I won't advise you much. I will ask people to maximize the protection of Mr. Kinyu's dormant warehouse. Qianyu and Kazuma both nodded. Shiina Yuin also added, "It's troublesome." That kind of middle-aged man smiled and said, "No trouble, the original group has invested heavily in this kind of field where there is an opportunity to make money, not to mention, the world has an unlimited preference for truly talented scientists." At this time, the resolute Funakoshi Hayato walked in, nodded to a few people with a serious expression, and then said, "The hibernation chamber and cryogenic fluid have been processed, and cryogenic hibernation can be started at any time." Asaba Kazuma was silent for a while, looking at the haggard Shiina Yuin, then turned to Dr. Funakoshi and said, "Start getting ready. I'll talk to her a few more words." Funakoshi Hayato nodded. When the people around him heard this, a trace of unbearability flashed across their faces. No one knows whether there is a chance to wake up after falling asleep this time. Human sleep technology has been an area that many people in the field of science and technology want to explore for many years, but whether it is based on ethics or current technology, there are still many tests that need to be faced. In fact, the areas where there are opportunities to make money that the head of the Genji group just mentioned was not as easy as he said. Genji had almost never been involved in this field before. He hurriedly helped the two of them solve the legal issues and got approval immediately. He quickly promoted the implementation of the project. The labor costs and even favors required cannot be calculated with funds. If it weren't for the fact that these twins were too dazzling among the younger generation in the scientific community, and the scientific research project that Genji had spent a lot of money on, he needed someone capable enough to take the helm, plus favors. Otherwise, people may not be so diligent. In fact, Asaba Kazuma and Shiina Yuin knew this. The staff in the laboratory all retreated, leaving enough space for the young couple. Shiina Kian bit her lower lip gently, her expression seemed a little hesitant, but she was afraid that she would not have a chance in the future, so she still mustered up the courage to say, "Actually, it was quite early when we first met. After all, there are not many people in the school who look as outstanding as you." Qian Yufengjian smiled, "That's right, although I don't rely on my appearance to make a living, my foundation is there." Shiina Yuan's face gradually became flushed. "Although I would sometimes look at you, I didn't really like you at that time. When I saw you crying when you were bullied, my first reaction was you love crying. I rarely cry, so I don't really like people crying, especially boys. Later, then you changed so much that it aroused my curiosity. At that time, I really wanted to see what you were like from the bottom of my heart." Condition. Then. She seemed a little hesitant to tell this matter, as it was a bit embarrassing after all. "Actually, we met on the bus for the first time at that time. I came to you on purpose. I just wanted to see what changes had happened to you. I didn't expect that the bus was too crowded that day." Although he didn't know why she mentioned such a distant thing, Asaba Kazuma couldn't help but smile. That encounter had somewhat ambiguous meaning. Looking back on it now, I really didn't expect that what was accidental at that time could now be within reach. Not to mention, it's really an exciting morning to have a senior support me. As he spoke, he winked at her. "The smell of your body. The smell on my body is quite good, and the tone of my voice has also changed drastically. When I lean on it, I feel very at ease, she murmured in a low voice, with some helplessness on her face. Did I give up too much at that time? It was obviously just curiosity and surprise at the beginning. As she said this, she quietly measured his reaction. She seemed to feel a little embarrassed, pouting, as if she would run out if she was disliked. He smiled knowingly and said, "Everyone is curious, and everyone comes from that time." Xianauman was helpless. At the beginning, I was also worried about what the relationship between us was. Pure curiosity? Trust in you? Or is it an object of admiration and dependence? What is the real thought in my heart? What now? He said with a smile. Without a doubt, it's love. An undisguised smile broke out on her face. Although he knew her answer, Asahikazuma's heartbeat still accelerated after hearing what she said. Looking at her gently trembling eyelashes, Qian Yufengjian lifted the ends of her hair. This kind of straightforward and hot love really made him feel a little overwhelmed. If you keep doing this, I really won't be able to sleep peacefully. Even though the two are already married, they are like little wildcats testing each other. They rarely lie down straightforwardly, expose their bellies, and show their obedience and joy. They are reserved people by nature. Because of this, when his restrained shell was broken, he was so unwilling to sleep. "Mr. Asaba, everything has been arranged." Funakoshi Hayato's voice came from the door. "Come in," Kinyo Kazuma said directly. He was afraid that if he didn't speak, he would never have the courage again. "I'll wait for you in the future," he said. Shianakian nodded and looked at him intently, as if she wanted to carve his smile into her mind. "When you wake up, I will help you solve all the problems, as agreed." "Of course, you are my wife," he stated the facts with a smile. Then, the dormant chamber slowly closed. The translucent glass surface was like a crystal coffin, sealing him in that small space. He stretched out his hand and lightly touched the glass. She did the same, touching his fingers through the glass. The anesthetic gas begins to be slowly released. Hien. I regret closing the hatch. Me too. I really want to be willful and not fall asleep. Xianayuan's face showed unprecedented wavering, and she almost stopped the sleep program, but in the end, she still held back. "It doesn't matter, it only takes a blink of an eye. We will meet again soon." "Okay, then let me take one more look at you." Kinyo Kazuma's face was filled with a bright smile, and suddenly he remembered something, and his voice became urgent. "Also, it's great to meet you." "Happy?" His somewhat frustrated voice began to become fainter. "I really want to stay with you again. You will have a hard time next. Besides, feel sorry." After that, Xianayuan never heard his voice again. He fell asleep quietly like this. She watched quietly as the expression on his face became peaceful, and suddenly a tear fell on the glass surface, sliding down the curved glass. "Good night, husband." She didn't come back to her senses until Hayato Funakoshi reminded her in a low voice that it was time for cryogenic liquid and real freezing. The nurse on the side wanted to open her mouth to comfort him, but when she saw Funakoshi Hayato shaking his head, she finally closed her mouth. For a long time, it was not until he saw that all the freezing processes were completed that Shianakane said, "Next, it's my mission." The news that one of the twin stars in the biomedical field chose to hibernate in the human body due to physical reasons caused quite a stir. This news circulated on the internet for a few days, but soon disappeared. There is no additional breaking news in this fast-paced era. It is an accident to cause a brief sensation. Xianayuan embarks on a path that only she is walking on. There are almost no travelers on this road, although various forces have related projects to induce the genes of ordinary people and turn them into adjusters. The research on protecting adjusters from dying of genetic collapse is almost zero. Looking back, there are almost no piers on this road going forward. It is a wasteland that no one has explored, and she is the one walking at the end of this road next. She needs to open the way. We've traveled through Tokyo, who still wants to simulate love? Author, Fei Se Huixiang. Chapter 92. This is a long journey. In the first half year of your sleep, she spent more and more time in the laboratory, but she still remembered what you told her not to stay in the laboratory for too long unless necessary. It was another year's cultural festival. She subconsciously passed by the entrance of Bean High School and quietly went in for a walk, but this year, no one was selling apple candies, and the person who was eating apple candies with her was no longer there. The night she came back from the laboratory, she asked her secretary to park the car at the school gate and go to the rooftop, playing the familiar dance music. That night, she had a good dream, and in the dream you were dancing with her. The first year she fell asleep, she saw a breakthrough in VR technology on the news. The advancement of supplementary functional genetic equations is proceeding in an orderly manner as you have thought before. Xiana Yuan is a genius, a true genius, and her research capabilities will continue to grow as time goes by. The first gene adjustment reagent derived based on the supplementation of functional gene equations began to be used on a patient with only one adjusted gene. With the original gene stabilizing reagent technology and the latest exclusive gene adjustment reagent, the endangered patients have been successfully brought back. The first step of the gene adjustment reagent is to stabilize and improve. On the day the experiment was successful, she came to your crystal coffin and sat there quietly for a long time before finally choosing to return to her home. You are not dead and cannot accompany her in ghost form. You can only follow her through this long wait from her perspective. Although she listens to you and eats, drinks and sleeps well, when she looks in the mirror, you still find that she looks a little haggard. The scene unfolds. Come on, let me play. Xiana Qian smiled happily. You handed her the full coverage VR glasses in her hand. She put on the VR glasses and seemed to be stroking something. And you took advantage of the fact that she was invisible while wearing VR glasses, and gently knelt down on one knee to propose to her. All the beautiful scenery is fixed at the most beautiful time. Then a reminder suddenly appeared in her sight. Low battery, please charge in time. She slowly took off her VR glasses, and the real scene constructed by VR was like a dream. She slowly looked around, and then realized that there was nothing in this room, let alone him. VR technology is advancing so fast. I thought I touched him, she said helplessly. It's a pity, it's still fake. Xiana Yuan walked out of the house. When she walked out of the house, she looked back and saw the wooden sign of Qian Yu's house hanging on the door. Asahi Kazuma in the simulation space smiled knowingly. Counting the time, the gift he sent should be arriving soon. Sure enough, not long after she went out, the old woman at the gate of the community waved to her. Mrs. Kinyu, there is a package for you. Xiana Yuan was a little confused. Normally, she rarely receives packages. One is because she hardly does online shopping now, and the other is because few people know her mobile phone number. She was a little curious as to who sent it. When she got the package, she looked at the mailer. Light space. And the last digit of the phone number that she knew so well. She was silent for a moment, picked up the package and returned home. After opening the package, there is a small control screen and Bluetooth speaker inside. She rummaged through the package and soon saw a small card. There are spells written on them. Xiana Kane tilted her head curiously, and for a moment she didn't understand what tricks her husband had prepared for her. Until I saw the small card at the end with his words written on it. A spell must be recited to be effective. Seeing the neat little words, she seemed to see him standing in front of her, scratching the palm of her hand, urging her like this. For a time, her mood became much happier. Her eyes looked at the Bluetooth speaker. Opening his mouth slightly, he still recited the spell, Fengjian, will you help me escape from the birdcage? After a while, a preset voice packet came from the Bluetooth speaker. Definitely. It's his voice. Xiana Yuan subconsciously covered her mouth, and the scene in her eyes became blurry. She suppressed the trembling in her voice and continued to chant the spell, Fengjian, I want to eat candy apples. I'll buy it for you and let's eat together. Kazima, will you dance this dance with me every year from now on? Sure. Will we always be together in the future? Most definitely. Every familiar voice, when she chants a specific spell, will activate the preset voice package and give a reply. In a daze, she seemed to remember the first time the two met. I remembered him dragging me to the park. He took out his umbrella from his bag and smiled maliciously. She shared candy apples and octopus balls with him. He told her that the lunchbox he made was delicious. When she was sick, he sat quietly next to her, not daring to rest all night. She was on the rooftop with him, dancing to the moonlight. She was melancholy, yet joyful, so that when she opened her mouth, her voice was so complex. Fengjian, Fengjian. In the simulation space, Kinya Kazuma was silent for a moment, a little embarrassed, but said seriously, I've always been here. It was as if what he said now could reach her ears. Xianyuan is full of expectations for life again. The Bluetooth speaker you left behind has accompanied her through many days and nights. The number of patients with two adjusted genes is very small, and the genetic sample data is not sufficient. She chose to put her own genetic samples into the supplementary functional gene equation for deduction. But the data samples are still not enough. There are really too few genetic samples with two or more genes. Suddenly one day, she received a genetic sample from a person named Rina. You tested it and found that it was indeed an ultra-rare person with two genes. After some time, the Genji group collected two new samples that also had two adjustment genes. After the data was supplemented to a certain extent, the progress of the complementary functional gene equation deduced for the two adjustment genes increased rapidly. 2 months later, she successfully completed the breakthrough of the double-stranded exclusive version of the gene adjustment reagent. Since then, she has not found any three-stranded adjusted gene samples. Realizing how special her husband is, she finally understands that she will face a real challenge. She knows that her husband is the owner of more than 3 chains of compound adjustment genes. Unlike the previous situation, there is no foundation for related gene samples. She wants to deduce supplementary functional gene equations based on your more complex gene chains. The difficulty increases exponentially. The derivation experiment is in trouble. She was listening to dance music on the rooftop of Bean High School. The derivation experiment is in trouble. At this year's cultural festival, someone was selling apple candy again. She bought it and took it home, but didn't open it and ate it until it went bad. The derivation experiment is in trouble. It's another year's cultural festival accompanied by the principal. She visited the exhibition hall and saw the photo of your class inside. The one above smiled brightly, and the tenderness in her eyes almost melted. In the simulation space, Qianyu was silent for a while. 3 consecutive derivation experiments are in trouble, 3 consecutive cultural festivals, and a few brief conversations mean that Xianyuan has invested 3 years of hard work in this project, but there has been almost no breakthrough. Could it be that their deduction was in the wrong direction? Is the path to supplementing functional genetic equations a dead end? He suddenly felt a little uncomfortable. Could it be that he would have to watch her feel so uncomfortable in the next simulation? Although he had been mentally prepared for many battles, he still instinctively did not want to see such a result. He gritted his teeth and continued to look at the content behind the simulation. Xianyuan's experiment has made a small breakthrough, and it can basically determine the derivation of the equation for the 3-gene chain. Someone took over the work of Professor Fujiki and developed a rather unstable gene induction reagent, which caused the death of a large number of adjuster children. Because you have too many adjustment genes, it is already particularly difficult to continue deriving genetic equations from this path. Xianyuan began to try to derive complementary functional gene equations for higher numbers of gene chains. Due to excessive use and disrepair, the Bluetooth speaker you left behind was damaged. After contacting the manufacturer, Xianyuan learned that the production line had been discontinued, so she spent her own money to reorganize the production line. She wanted to repair the gift you gave her. The day the Bluetooth speaker was repaired, she had a bright smile on her face. Another year has passed, and after painstaking efforts, the genetic adjustment reagent, exclusive to Kazuma, based on your genes has been successfully produced. The scene unfolds. That was a long, long dream. So long that he thought he would never wake up. The lilies in front of the window will also wither under the polish of time. The sweetness of candy apples also comes with the decay of time. For a while, he will miss one person very much, but can't let go of the other person very much. When he couldn't think anymore, he would start to draw the tickets in his deep sleep. One stroke after another, stroke after stroke. His talent is so good that every ticket is drawn very realistically, as if he can get on the train to reality as long as he swipes the ticket at the ticket gate. But obviously, there is no such train, but it is not without its benefits. As long as you look at the ticket a few more times, you can dream that they are coming to her. Not to mention, the success rate is quite high. Sometimes he wished he could turn into a butterfly, fly, and stay on her fingertips. It's a pity that even if you become a butterfly, you can't fly out of the barrier between dreams and reality. And then this day, the butterfly flew across the illusory barrier. Time seemed to pass at this moment, so long that he almost forgot the feeling of warmth. He heard his own heartbeat. Tears fell down his cheeks unconsciously. But it doesn't seem to be his. Time seemed to have passed for a long time, and the voices around him began to boil. Thawed successfully. The first case of human dormant person awakening. The gene adjustment reagent is well absorbed and the patient's physical condition is stable. Dr. Kyanba. This is undoubtedly a great success. Another milestone breakthrough has been achieved in supplementing functional genetic equations. When he opened his eyes, he tried to turn his face sideways, trying to find the familiar face from his surroundings. It seemed that because he had just woken up, his body was still a little stiff. It took me a long time to finish reading one corner. He didn't see her, so he became a little anxious. Then, he felt the kiss on his cheek, which was warm and had a faint fragrance. Blue water. When he smelled it, he knew it was her. Kinya Kazuma stretched out her hand, hugged her gently and said, "I'm back." She raised her head, looked at his face blankly, and then said with a bright smile, "Welcome home. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. We've traveled through Tokyo. Who still wants to simulate love? Author, Fei Se Huasiang. Chapter 93. 6 years passed in a blink of an eye. When you woke up from the dusty ice coffin, the whole world was shaken. Not many people know about gene adjustment reagents and the most critical supplementary functional gene equation behind it. People are more excited about human dormancy technology. After you wake up from hibernation, she becomes more and more clingy. System prompt: you have unlocked the achievement hibernation. Achievement points add 1. I am soaking in the hot water pool at home, feeling this feeling of coming back to life outside the window. A first snowfall is slowly falling. The scene unfolds. Although his body has recovered a lot, Asahi Kazuma still feels a little weak, perhaps because he just woke up from hibernation. Watching the first snow of the year falling slowly from the sky. Falling at the window. Falling on the treetops. Fall on the roof. Fell on her shoulders. He stretched out his hand and gently brushed the snow off her shoulders, and whispered, "Come inside, it's getting cold outside." Shianakane put her hands behind her and came to him quietly at some point. She took out the scarf in her hand and carefully wrapped it around him. Chienyu Kazuma looked at the woman beside him. 6 years have passed and she can no longer be called a girl. But it's not right to say that. Ever since she became Mrs. Kinyu, she is no longer a girl. Thinking of this, he couldn't help but chuckle. He stretched out his hand and rubbed her little head, which was a little stiff from the cold. He didn't slowly let go until she laughed, and whispered. The weather is still cold. If you want to do those silly things, don't do it outdoors. When did I cheat? Shianakian pouted, looking unhappy. Kinyo Kazuma shook his head. You've done a lot of cheating. You secretly bit me awake when I was sleeping, pricked my finger with your tiger fangs when others weren't paying attention, and you took advantage of our parents serving us food. Shianakane blushed and blocked what he said. The blush on her face was so obvious, and then a snowflake fell on his lips. The temperature of his body slowly melted the snowflakes, and she approached without hesitation. Qian Yufengjian only felt two soft and cold lips slowly eating away the coldness of the snow. In this first snow, the girl's long-suppressed charming charm was intoxicating. When she raised her head to look at you shyly, you pinched her nose and said, "In a few days, I can make up for a complete wedding for you." Yes, she rested her head on her husband's chest with peace of mind, feeling his heartbeat, her eyes full of beautiful longing for the future. "But you are so bad," she said helplessly, "let Asami be the bridesmaid or something." Asahi Kazuma said with a smirk on her lips, "Isn't it nice to let her recall the past of society and death, and then watch us walk into the wedding hall honestly? Be careful that Asami stabs you secretly," Shianakian joked, and then she opened her hands, looking like she was seeking a hug, and said with a smile, "You know what I want, right?" Asayu Kazuma picked her up and spun her around in mid-air. Then he put her down, smelled the scent of her collarbone, gently tapped the snowflakes on her body with his soft tongue, and said, "Bing bing." He took out the new mobile phone she bought him, clicked on the music player, and Mozart Minuet in D major played leisurely. He made an inviting gesture and said, "My wife, you shouldn't be unfamiliar with her, right?" Shianakian gently raised the hem of her skirt, and as she looked around, her love surged like a tide, and she said with red eyes, "But I'm rusty, so you have to teach me how to dance well." Not long after, your wedding invitations were sent to everyone who should get the invitations. The wedding was held as scheduled. This sudden news surprised the parents who were still immersed in the joy of their children waking up, but they still sincerely sent you blessings and rushed to Tokyo to help you. The scene unfolds. The wedding scene was very lively, and several bridesmaids were gathering together, with nervousness in their eyes. Asami said anxiously, what on earth is my sister-in-law doing? The wedding is coming soon. Where did she go?" In the morning, the wedding car arrived at Shianakane's house. When Asami and the other bridesmaids played the door-blocking game, they didn't embarrass Asaba Kazuma. Especially Asami. Logically speaking, she is very hostile to anyone who wants to possess her brother, but after reluctantly becoming a bridesmaid, she is a well-behaved and cute person. She knew very well that Sister Hien had been waiting for this day for a long time. Although she felt a little sour in her heart, feeling that her brother who was the best to her had someone more worthy of cherishing, she still accepted the call and opened the door directly. Asaba Kazuma was wearing a white suit, which highlighted his slender figure. He was very handsome. During the tea ceremony, several bridesmaids were stunned. But now something big happened. Brother Feng Jian went to the banquet to greet the guests, and Sister Hien went to the dressing room, put on the wedding dress for the ceremony, and touched up her makeup. Logically speaking, the next step should be the beginning of the marriage. Seeing that the luncheon had already reached 12 o'clock, Shianakane, who was supposed to finish putting on makeup, suddenly disappeared. This made Asami very anxious. She was a little sour, but that didn't mean she didn't want to see her good cousin have a happy marriage. He had been waiting for her for a long time. "Shianayuine, what on earth are you doing?" Her face was full of anxiety, and she looked at Kinyo Kazuma from time to time, walked over quietly and said, "Brother, aren't you worried at all?" Kinyo Kazuma shook his head, "I am also anxious, but, I believe in Hien more. She will not allow herself to have regrets. Just as he said this, a mechanical sound suddenly sounded on the wedding reception stage, attracting everyone's attention. At the same time, the wedding scene turned into darkness. Everyone was making a noise, but soon, as a high platform slowly fell from the sky, and accompanied by a melodious and beautiful violin sound, everyone became quiet. Kinya Kazuma smiled. How could he not know who the person on the stage was? On the platform that was suspended in mid-air and slowly falling, she seemed to be immersed in the world of the violin. The white wedding dress was so beautiful, but it was different from her appearance and the beauty that even ordinary people could immerse themselves in. Compared with the sound of the violin, it is simply a world of difference. Today, the sound of her violin is played only because of him. Shiana's mother, who was sitting below, had a look of helplessness on her face. I almost gave up the violin, but why now? That was a realm that she had never been able to pursue in her life, a voice that could stand among the violins in the world. In the end, she chose to hold Shiana Kiyoshi's hand and said to her husband, "Today is such a good day." Shiana Kiyoshi nodded, looking at the candy apples and lilies everywhere at the wedding, and finally said, "This is the path she has firmly chosen. As parents, we cannot hold her back." Asami Asaba had a complicated expression on her face at the wedding. She was almost driven crazy by Shiana Yuin, who suddenly disappeared, but she was also full of longing for this kind of science fiction love. Only those who are relatives and relatives of Asaba Kazuma can understand what she has paid for so many years. The wedding scene was very lively. The theme you set was flowers and apple candies. The dress was beautiful and girlishly playful on the stage. She played the violin for you this time. It was not for others, just for you. Listen to you. Your parents had already anticipated your sudden wedding ceremony, and they sent you their blessings. I just don't know what your mother was thinking about, so she kicked you with some confusion and whispered, "Hien is a good girl, you must love her, / We've traveled through Tokyo, who still wants to simulate love?" Author, Fei Se Huasiang. Chapter 94. Half an hour after Asaba Kazuma ran into the hot water pool, she regained her senses. The real emotions in the simulation will eventually affect him in reality. He felt that his original persistence was now shaken like never before. Damn it, first Rina and then Hien, who can withstand this? If it were someone else, it would be a directly. He took a deep breath and said silently in his heart, "You don't even talk about love with dogs." As he was thinking about it, suddenly, he couldn't help shouting "woof" in his mouth. For a moment, his face became a little distorted. Come on, there seems to be no way to separate simulation and reality. Let it go first. It's still late at night. It's useless to do anything at this time. You can't attack the Shiana family at night and let Hien, who is still hiding her emotions well, cry all night, right? Could it be that Zhang-san started teaching you about criminal law that night? But I still want to find her. It's a pity that she doesn't know him very well now. But he did have a small handle on her, and if he used it well, he could tease her hard. After all, someone took advantage of me on the bus. He picked up his clothes and smelled them, but he didn't feel any obvious fragrance on his clothes. What went wrong that caused her to have such an illusion? Kinya Kazuma suddenly looked forward to meeting her in reality. Shiana Uman is the kind of girl who never disappoints people. Whenever you think you have discovered her beautiful side, she will take the initiative to show a more desirable side. Of course, all this is predicated on the fact that you are the one she wants to catch. Otherwise, there is no need to discuss anything. But then again, I feel like Hien is just an emotional player. Just look at the timing of how many times she exploded. Every time there is an emotional uptick, there will be some little accident that will surprise him. Even the violin played for him at the wedding reception at the end. In the past, his understanding of Hien's violin was too one-sided. He blindly believed that with his absolute pitch sense and erudition, he could be called a genius in learning the violin and playing music. But he is still far away from that kind of top player. As a result, later on, even though she didn't practice violin much, she was still influenced by her emotions and naturally developed to the palace level. It feels like, this is entirely a problem with the Shiana family's education methods. Hien is the kind of person who is suitable for interest education. Making her happy and free can liberate her own potential better than any other method. In this case, there was a flash of thought in his eyes. Maybe if he interferes in her life in reality, she can try to change her mind again. Oysters, oysters, oysters. He shook his head wildly. What was he doing? What about the righteous separation between simulation and reality? Finally, the stubborn Asaba Kazuma hinted to himself in his heart. I just want to save a good girl. This is something that normal people are willing to help. Laughing to death, Asahi Kazuma, even though she knew she had other thoughts, her whole body was softened by the play of these two good girls, but in the end, her mouth was still hard. However, the reward for this vigorous 3-round simulation is truly astonishing. Just the abilities absorbed from Hien include Talent Bowen Kyangji, Skills, Violin Performance, Temple Level, Gemini Biotechnology, Asaba Uman. When Asaba Kazuma first started simulating, he originally wanted to pass the exam as quickly as possible and directly obtain talents that can enhance his learning ability from Hien, so as to help him successfully enter Tokyo University. Going back further, the reason why I questioned the reason why I was admitted to Tokyo University was that I wanted to further study the adjustment of genes. But now, come on, after this wave of simulations, the two of them have almost pushed forward the research on adjusting genes by more than 100 years. The Tokyo University School of Medicine is a crappy test. He doesn't need that little support from the University of Tokyo Medical School right now. However, he did not immediately activate another talent he obtained from Hien. Before the problem of gene activation is solved, if you continue to do this kind of thing, you are courting death. But when he looked at the achievement store, he was still shocked by the results in the achievement store. Wealth add 200,000 yen, unlimited time/price, 1 point. Function detector, temporary activity, digestion potion, unlimited time/price, 1 point. Achievements Gemini Biotechnology, Asaba Kazuma, 10th generation genetic adjustment reagent gene codex, unlock/price, 1 point. Attributes Intelligence add 1, Charm add 1, Physical Strength add 1, unlock/limited purchase/price, 1 point. Props Charm Potion, Bright Eye Drop, Dragon Spear Mixture, Magic Collar, unlock/refreshed every simulation round/price, 1 point. In the simulation, I really worked hard. His eyes sparkled with excitement. I can't blame him for being excited. If the biggest reward for Rena's simulation was the talent reward that emerged from her body, then the biggest reward for Hien's simulation was actually the achievement store. After all, the results column in the achievement store contains the many achievements he achieved in the simulation. His last achievements were Succubus Reincarnated, the Prince of Tennis and the Tennis Ability Gift Pack. Are these things useful? Ask yourself. It is indeed very useful for him in his initial stage. But the results are completely different from this time. In one fell swoop, he obtained a complete set of biotechnologies developed by himself and Hien. Just from licensing the patents, he could make a lot of money. Not to mention developing patents and exploring their potential. And the genetic code. This thing is the final result that he and Hien spent half their lives to complete. Even if they drank the digestive potion later and accelerated the absorption of all the knowledge of Gemini biotechnology, it would still take a long time to reproduce the genetic code. Time. This thing is not comparable to the 4-strand gene adjustment reagent. Therefore, there is no need to think about it at all, Just exchange it directly. Attributes: intelligence add 1, charisma add 1, physical strength add 1, required option. Buy. Achievements: Gemini Biotechnology, Asaba Kazuma, 10th generation genetic adjustment reagent gene codex. His lifelong achievement, even if it is lost in reality, can create a large-scale biotechnology giant. It must be selected. Buy. Select items: Charm Potion, Bright Eyes Potion, Dragonlance Mixture, Magic Collar. These props should be the same as those used to teach my wife before. They have different uses on certain occasions and can even open branch roots. There are enough achievement points now, so let's try. Buy. Function: Digestion Potion, a must-have product if you want to speed up digestion. Time is money. Buy. Achievement points -10. All attribute points add 3. Tips: your intelligence, charm, and physical strength have reached 10 points, reaching the human limit under normal conditions. Tips: your charm has exceeded 10 points, please choose the development direction of charm above 10 points. Have my attributes reached their normal human limits? Asahi Kazuma estimated the data. After completing the temporary activity, my physical strength add 1. Coupled with the simulation of 2 wives, all attributes are add 2. After this conversion, my original attributes should be Intelligence 8, Charisma 9, Physical Strength 7. But now it has been upgraded to Intelligence 10, Charisma 11, and Physical Strength 10. He looked at the explanation for Intelligence 10. It roughly means the peak of normal people's learning ability, which can easily defeat any college. The explanation of Charm 10 is the groom in the dreams of countless girls, and it is difficult for ordinary people to resist their attraction to you. The explanation of Physical Strength 10 is the limit of the normal human body. In any sports field, you have the possibility to compete for the championship. Let's look at the explanation of the extra charm. Charisma that goes beyond the normal category can be added to certain characteristics, such as eyes, smile, skin, bone appearance, temperament, taste, and other subdivisions. Asahi Kazuma pondered for a moment and added this charm to the sub-attribute temperament mystery. After adding it, he first came to the mirror to see what changes had happened to him. After observing carefully for a long time, he finally discovered that when he looked at himself in the mirror, not only his temperament, but also his eyes changed slightly. If I had to describe it, it was as if there were many things hidden in his eyes that others could not decipher, as if he was tempting others to open this treasure. Coupled with the good looks that are already full now. To be honest, he had a feeling that not many people could resist his initiative now. He had met 2 people with this mysterious temperament in his previous life. He has also seen many people with good looks who cannot be understood by ordinary people. But he has never seen anyone with both characteristics at the same time. Temperament is something that is easy to say but difficult to obtain. No matter how many scholarly families come from a good family, they can never develop a bookish temperament in their children. However, some people, even if they have never read a book, can have such a temperament that makes people think that they often read books at a glance. It can be said that this add 1 sense of mystery makes the overall feeling more layered and exploratory. Good for a social terrorist like him. However, after reading the description of these attributes, Qian Yufengjian was thoughtful again. Such attributes, for ordinary people, belong to the pinnacle that is unreachable in all aspects. But that's just for ordinary people. The short life experience in his previous life taught him a truth: some real geniuses don't look like ordinary people. There may be some people whose intelligence, charm, and physical strength are not as high as his, but the development direction of their extra attribute points may be completely different from his. For example, if Asaba Kazuma wants to go further in biomedicine, then in the next round of intelligence points he adds, the part exceeding 10 points should be in the direction of biomedicine under the intelligence subcolumn. By then, Asaba Kazuma's intelligence attribute should be 10, add 1 biomedicine, for a total of 11 points of intelligence attribute. But some people may have a basic attribute of 9 or even 8, but they don't need to be full of intelligence attributes to have special research talents in certain fields. Also add 11 points for the intelligence attribute, they might be 8, add 3 biomedicine. Such a person may be inferior to him in learning ability, but looking at the field of biomedicine alone, there is a high probability that he can go further than Asaba Kazuma in the field of biomedicine, and then be beaten in any other field of study. This situation can also be explained in sports. He may be able to challenge the world championship in any competition, but when he meets Bolt at his peak, he still cannot win in sprinting. Because some people are beyond the understanding of ordinary people in specific fields. Forget it, let's not think about it so much for now. The harvest this time was so great that he couldn't even absorb it. Suddenly a double helical needle appeared in his hand, and the crimson liquid inside had an amber-like beauty. This is his Enhian's lifelong achievement, the genetic adjustment potion and genetic code. He slowly injected the medicine into his veins, then lay down on the bed and began the final step. Talent, Bowen Jiangji, activate it. Skills, violin performance, temple level, Gemini biotechnology, Asaba Kazuma / Asaba Uman, activate. Digestion potion, use it. Kunyulu, let me see my limit.